here from Practically Free Porsche. I'm a Porsche enthusiast and a Porsche author. I wrote the Practically Free Porsche book series. Why Practically Free? Well, as I explain in the book, I think if you buy the right Porsche at the right price, it can be practically free motoring. And in the books I explain exactly how I've done that and how you can do that too. So today I'm out in my 2010 Boxster base. It's a 2.9, 987.2, and I thought I'd come out here and do a wee video and discuss the 10 things that I think you should know about when buying any Boxster 987 or Cayman. The purpose of this video is not to alarm you or to put you off buying a Boxster or a Cayman. In fact, it's quite the opposite. And despite what you're going to hear in this video, Boxsters and Caymans are actually very reliable cars, and they're a fantastic post-purchase. So please don't let anything I'm going to tell you in this video put you off buying one. Just, you know, take it in the context that it's meant, and that's for educational purposes. Chances are you'll come across a car that's had some of these issues rectified, and you won't come across them in your ownership experience. The Boxster 987, I think, is one of the best Porsches to buy. It's certainly one of the best value Porsches, and having owned a couple myself, I can certainly vouch for that through personal experience. It's a fantastic sports car, and it's becoming more and more popular. So it's important that you know the things to look out for, just so that you can make your ownership experience as pleasurable as possible. Buying a Porsche is still a big deal, you know, and it's a lifelong dream for a lot of people. So you want to go into it with your eyes open, just so that you don't have any, you know, any kind of horror stories looking or anything you should be. I'll start with number 10 on my list, and that is the rear main seal, the RMS. And the reason I thought I'd start with that is because it's a very common issue for a lot of Boxsters, 986 and 987. And all it really is an oil leak coming from the rear main seal area. It's often visible from underneath the car. You might see a little weeping or a kind of sweating area where there's some oil. As long as this is just sweating a little bit and not heavily flowing out the car or pouring out the car, a rear main seal can probably be addressed when you're doing the clutch. It's not something to be overly concerned about. Again, very common. The actual part itself is like a wee O-ring rubber seal. It's very, very cheap to buy, but to access it you've got to take a transmission out, so you're better leaving it to when you require a clutch replacement, and you can do the rear main seal at the same time. Again, very common. My previous Boxster S had a weeping RMS, and I just lived with it. I kept mine it. It wasn't using any oil, so you know, I just kept mine it, and it didn't give me any problems throughout my ownership. Well, 9 in the list, that's potentially something that could concern you a lot more. That's the IMS. That's the intermediate shaft bearing. Few things I spoke about more in Boxsters, you know, I do with Boxsters and Porsches of that era as the dreaded IMS going wrong. It's basically a little bearing, and Porsche tried 3 times to try and fix this design, but you know, nothing really worked. But again, in my books I really talk about this in a great amount of detail, but for the purposes of this video, all you've really got to know is that all Boxsters had the IMS, and 911s and Caymans as well for that matter, had a potentially problematic IMS bearing up until 2006. After that, you don't have to really worry about the IMS so much. Some people say the IMS has been overhyped and it's not a major problem. Well, I don't know about that. I would say it's serious enough, and if it's something that you know you're unfortunate enough to happen to you, it's a catastrophic failure. There's not much warning. In fact, often there's no warning. Some people have said in the past the bearing was noisy. You could hear it when the engine was going. A lot of people talk about no prior warning whatsoever. So, you know, it can be an engine replacement or an engine rebuild job, which could obviously be very, very costly. So you want to look out for that. Again, 2006 cars and beyond, are fairly, you know, problem free, and I wouldn't be concerned. Don't be put off buying a car before 2006, it's not something to worry about. Just be mindful of it, and it's something to factor in for when you get the clutch replaced, or if it's bothering you, you can have it done before then. You could do things like put a magnetic sump plug in so that it can draw little magnetic particles, and that can sometimes be a telltale sign that the IMS is on its way out. Or you could cut your oil filter to check for particles, or do an oil analysis if you really wanted. But again, the IMS, it's not that expensive to buy. You can buy upgrades, market upgrades, and again, you know, it's a fairly labour intense job. So my advice would be, if you're ever going to get the clutch replaced, do the RMS and the IMS at the same time as the clutch for absolute peace of mind. And again, don't worry about the IMS, just factor it into your buying decisions. Number 8 is the air oil separator, or the AOS for short. A faulty AOS will often show up as an error code on your dashboard. Other telltale signs are excessive oil use, and probably the most telltale sign is you'll see a lot of smoke coming out the exhaust. The flat 6 Boxster engine does sometimes smoke on startup, but it should clear in a couple of minutes. If your AOS is faulty, then there will be a lot of smoke, and it will be very apparent. An AOS replacement for about £60 or £70 currently, and labour time to change it is around about 2, maybe 2 and a bit hours. So it's not a particularly difficult job to do. 7 in my list are coolant system leaks. So that means the coolant reservoir, the radiators, the hose connectors, the water pump, and the front coolant pipe. These are all things that are getting to an age where they've been leaking a little bit. Telltale signs, obviously you'll see the leak, but the whole system should be checked periodically just to make sure. Obviously things like the temperature gauge going a bit higher with a telltale sign. You also hear in terms of the water pump, that's a very, very common thing. And my previous Boxster S had a water pump fail, and again, it's a very, very common thing. And you can hear the pump starting to go a little bit. It's like a kind of a winding, kind of bearing type noise. It kind of winds. It's unusual, and that's usually a telltale sign that the water pump is on its way out. Unusual noise coming from the back of the car. It could be up at the pump. I would get it checked out. If you're driving and your temperature gauge suddenly shoots up, then that's a different story. It's an emergency. I would pull over and get the car towed to a local garage. The pump's not expensive, it's a couple £100. Labour, maybe 4 or 5 hours to do. So yeah, think about doing that. And you can also potentially upgrade the thermostat while you're there, which will add some to the cost, but will give you extra peace of mind. So yeah, the water pump is a very common thing, so check that and the cooling system in its entirety. Number 6 in my list is the dreaded bore scoring, which afflicts certain models, mostly the S models. I won't go into too much detail on why it happens, but we can summarise it by saying that insufficient cooling in the material used in the cylinders, it can make some cars be prone to bore scoring. It probably affects about 5% of cars. It is quite serious if it happens, and it's a replacement cylinder or more than one cylinder. Again, it doesn't happen to be an issue with the base models, so the 2.7 and 2.9 seem fairly immune to bore scoring. The 3.2 and the 3.4, more so the 3.4, are a wee bit more susceptible to the dreaded bore scoring. Some cars can have scored bores and show no signs at all. It can go for years with no real signs. Other cars have got excessive oil usage and smoke on start-up. Sometimes you get sooty tailpipes as well. Excessive soot in the tailpipes can be an indication. Just something to bear in mind. If you're looking at an S model car and you're concerned about the possibility of bore scoring, then have it scoped, have the bore scoped prior to purchase by someone that knows what they're doing, and that'll give you some peace of mind. If you're unfortunate enough to have purchased a car and you later find out that it has got some scored bores, you usually do have some time to do something about it. Like I say, the car will run fairly okay for quite a long time, and it'll start to use more and more oil, more smoke and start up, and it'll become more and more of a problem. It will need fixed, but it's something that can be fixed, but it's obviously quite expensive to do that. So the idea is to avoid a car with bore scoring in the first place. Number 5 in my list is suspension components. Probably more so the springs than anything else. They seem to be a kind of weak spot in a lot of Boxsters. My previous Boxster S had a spring go, and I've heard about it quite a lot, so it's something to bear in mind. Other suspension components components like coffin arms, drop links, bushes, that kind of thing, they can start to show some signs of wear from around about 45,000 miles onwards. But obviously each car will be different depending on how it's been driven and how it's been serviced. Something to look out for, you can tell by creaky noises going across bumps. If a spring does go, it's quite a loud banging noise, I can tell you from experience, so you'll hear that pretty easily. Cost wise, Porsche springs can be expensive, suspension parts in general can be expensive, but shop around, get some aftermarket parts as well and some upgrades. Give an opportunity for you to upgrade your springs and your dampers while you're there, which will really transform the car as well. Costs range, you know, it depends what you're having done, and obviously labour as well, but it's not a hard job to do. Any basic mechanic skills rather, should be able to do these things. You don't have to take it to a Porsche garage to have this done specifically, so just something to bear in mind. Number 4 on my list is the check engine warning light. That'll come up as a wee kind of amber light on your dashboard. It's a very common thing, and it will show up for like faulty O2 sensors and anything like that. So it's a good idea to get yourself a wee fault reader and plug it in and do a wee diagnostic check now and again, and it can identify the fault, and obviously once the fault is rectified you can then clear it with the reader. It's worthwhile investing in one of these wee things. It saves you a lot of time and hassle and potential grief in the long run. So yeah, that's engine check lights. They will show up a coil pack problem as well. Coil packs are a kind of common thing as well, and a fault reader will show that up and help you identify the problem and get it fixed. And at number 2 is the window regulator. Seen more and more of these fail, and it's more so on older Boxsters, and it would become a problem obviously if your window doesn't work, the switch doesn't work, you'll notice it. And it's not an expensive part, you can buy it for about £100 and labour's about an hour or so to do, so it's not a big problem, but fairly common, so just look out for that one. And at number 1 on the list is the gear shift linkage. Hearing more and more reports about this going wrong, and if it does, it can leave you stranded by the roadside unfortunately, so it's something worth taking seriously. It happened on this very car before I bought it, and I've seen on the receipts from Porsche Glasgow that it has had the gear linkage replaced. You can tell if it's going its way out because it's quite stiff, it's quite hard to change gear, and again they're quite a fragile thing, so if it does go wrong it can snap and it can leave you stranded. So if you do find yourself having to replace your gear linkage, it's not expensive, you can buy the full system, it's a couple £100, labour 2 or 3 hours. You're probably best to upgrade to upmarket new performance parts while you're there, just to save it happening again, because it seems to be quite a kind of weak point in some of these cars. So that's it, that's the top 10 items to think about. I hope you've enjoyed this little video. If you have, leave me a thumbs up, and remember to subscribe for more content. See you again soon guys, thank you.